Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am really excited to be here. I'm just going to let you know right now that I am in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we experience a lot of rolling power outages. And so we are currently in one of those right now. So this nice, lovely glow you see around me is the 3 lights that I have shining on me. And I've got a little backup system to help me out with being able to tune in on Wi-Fi. So welcome and thank you for joining me. This session is going to be about building social justice through reciprocal community partnerships. My name is Tiwanna Merritt again. I am a pre-K to 12 service learning coordinator and a teaching and learning coach here at the American International School of Johannesburg in South Africa. I've been here for about 4 years now, or this is my 4th year. And I'm really excited to take you through some of the experiences I've had with my students and my colleagues and our community here. So we have a few community agreements before we start. So this is an invitation to be vulnerable because we are going to be talking about a few sensitive topics today. And I know maybe we don't all know each other in this space, so it's messy but needed work that we can do together. I would like to invite you to leave the stories in this space, but please move the learning forward. The information and things that we discuss or talk about might be uncomfortable, but it's also an opportunity to be brave. And like I said, I know that takes a little bit of time usually in building up community and trust, but I'm hoping that we're all here for service learning and the shared learning that we're all going to do. So let's make this space collaborative and a collective positive energy of learning and growth. The usual graces apply, such as kindness, respect, compassion, listening with your whole self, mindfulness, and playfulness. If you have any other community agreements that you think should be listed here, could be listed here, that will make you feel more comfortable about this session, please, I welcome and invite you to put them in the chat. And while we're doing that, I would like to invite you to say where you're from, who you are, what organization or school you work with, so that we can kind of get to know each other. We're going to have an opportunity in a moment to get to know each other even more. But I thought for my sake, it would be great to know who's in the space today, who am I talking with and dealing with, and hopefully we can have some interactive and meaningful conversations along the way. So welcome to you all. And I'll give you just a moment to pop your details in the chat. As we move on to the next slide, we're going to do a bit of an activity here. And this is called The Story of a Name. This is a story that I heard on NPR. I don't know if any of you are NPR listeners, but it's called The Lost Women of Science. I have a degree in environmental science, so I'm very passionate about science and particularly women in science. So I'm going to invite you to listen to this story. And after this story, we're going to do a little bit of a share out. Let me know if you cannot hear this. You might have to unmute because I don't know if I'm able to get the chat.
It implies that you think differently. So what she did is she solved these problems by looking at things differently. And at Frankfurt Arsenal, she proved herself again and again. And still,
somebody found out that as an engineer, I was making more than the guys who came up through the ranks. So they got kind of upset, this female making more money than I am, and she just out of college, not even dry behind the ears.
The management told her she could no longer earn overtime. They wanted to make sure she wasn't making too much money because it would upset her male coworkers.
And when she applied for a raise after she'd passed the probationary period, they told her she'd have to wait. The men took priority.
So I went looking for another job.
Looking for a different job was one thing. It was another thing altogether to find one. And after weeks of searching, YY voiced her frustration to Bill.
Bill said, "You're trying to get a seat at a table in a men's only club, and you need to get through the door first."
Dad was the one who suggested that she go by her initials. Rather than it being Yvonne, make it Y.
The gender ambiguous initials seemed to work. In the fall of 1952, YY was called for an interview at RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, which had an engineering products department that was headquartered in New Jersey. A few weeks after that interview,
I got a telegram. Can you report XYZ? I said, yes, I can report. Gave my 2 weeks notice and I was on RCA's payroll.
6 Degrees of Freedom says YY was the first Black female engineer hired at RCA.
I was the only one, whatever the subject was.
YY was getting pretty used to being the first or the only wherever she was, and she was starting to get recognized for it.
RCA published a newsletter about YY in 1954 that her daughter Carol showed me. The headline is Lady Mechanical Engineer, and the copy reads, "The attractive girl worked her way up to a full-fledged engineer in less than 2 years and is now designing electrical equipment for RCA Victor. Having been the only woman in a Howard engineering class of 300, Miss Young is perfectly at home working with the 18 men in her department. Miss Young is the only Negro member of the American Society of Women Engineers."
Great. So I hope that you all were able to tune into that session. I like to try to explore different opportunities for learning and for growth while we're having presentations to tap into those folks who are more auditory learners. So now the next task for you is, let's go to my next slide. So you're going to go into a breakout room. I'm going to go in with one of you just to listen in. So I want you to actively listen for 2 minutes, uninterrupted, to your partner tell the story of their name using some of these prompting questions. So where does your name come from? Have you ever been stereotyped because of your name? Have you ever been genderized, particularly if you have a unisex name? Have you ever had privileges withheld because of your name? Have you noticed if you have been given privileges because of your name? And I want you to think back to the story of YY and her experiences of being a woman, and particularly a woman of color during her time period when she was trying to become an engineer and break into a field that is pretty male dominated. So I'm going to put you into breakout rooms and I'm going to try to post the questions up there so that you can see them. Hopefully you're capturing them right now. We're going to spend a few minutes in there and then we'll come back into this session. I'm just wondering if anyone wanted to share any thoughts from, what you discussed or talked about in your breakout room.
So I was in a breakout room with Rebecca. And we said, fortunately or unfortunately, we have not really experienced too many of the issues that came up with your question. Rebecca said, if anything, it was her last name. Shortening it has a non-appropriate slang for women, so that, sometimes caused. But as far as first names and like putting them on your resumes and things like that, that had not been an issue for either of us.
Thank you. Anyone else? You would have noticed in the story of Yvonne that there was a few different threads in there. First of all, her being a woman in a field where not very many women had been in, and then her being a Black woman in addition to that, and how that impacted her I guess her access to that role. I'm going to keep it moving if no one else has anything to share, because I have a few things to get through, but I just thought that would be a nice little way to introduce ourselves and for you all to spend some time getting to know each other. And so my relationship to service, I wanted to speak on the fact that I have worked overseas for the last 17 years, and it's been a really interesting experience coming here to South Africa, and my role as a service learning coordinator here has humbled and amazed me. Growing up, I received so many blessings and opportunities that nurtured me physically, mentally, and emotionally. And sometimes I stop and think about how I got here to this place and what plan the universe has to me, coming to a country known for historical policies such as apartheid, high poverty, and crime. I did not think it was a place that I would thrive. I was afraid, I was worried. There's been also this excitement about belonging throughout most of my life. I found myself living in predominantly white spaces. So to be able to come to the African continent, where my family left generations ago, I thought that I might find at least, you know, this part of my identity. And that was really exciting to me. So coming here 3 years ago, now I find I'm finding out a lot about myself and about life and about this really complex and beautiful country and continent. The character traits that I see expressed in the communities and that are around me, they're very layered, they're very complex. And I know it's the same in the States. However, I think the element here is something unique and different for me. So in alignment with this teaching and learning form, I hope that you'll hear through my stories some examples of learning about the service learning principles of education, and I guess things like IPARD and what NYLC seeks to do through their work. I think this work needs a lot of empathy, a lot of courage, and the ability to listen with your heart, your hands, and with your feet. It takes compassion and a willingness to learn and grow and get into communities in order to build and foster those relationships. So, and also understanding your own limitations and boundaries. I've had so many moments of vulnerability and just feeling very overwhelmed with being here. But another element among many of those is that you need to be compelled to be mobilized through tuning into what resources are needed in these communities and how someone like me can use my privilege and my position to equalize or support the redistribution of assets and resources. If you don't know a lot about South Africa, it's one of the most unequal countries in the world, and there's definitely a very obvious gap in social access, healthcare, policies, politics across the whole board. So learning about all of these things has really supported my work in education here and in connecting with communities and finding out what assets already exist in these communities and what is our responsibility for supporting change in the communities that we work with. So now I love this quote. I hope that my reach will exceed my grasp. I'm wondering if you all can have a little reflection time and a little thought. You're welcome to put in the chat. You're welcome to unmute. I want this to be as interactive as possible. But how is your school or your organization currently engaging students, faculty, your peers in conversations about creating or maintaining healthy community partnerships? So I'll give you a moment to think about that, and you're welcome to share out if you like.
Share a little in the fact that so I work for 4-H, which is a positive youth development program, and oftentimes people think you have to have a goat or a cow in order to participate in 4-H, and that is so far from the truth. We just do a poor job of getting out all of the things that we actually do with youth. But getting to your question, I think one of the things that we're struggling with now is rebuilding community partnerships. With just having COVID and not having access to youth and students, because we're an after school, out of school organization. So it's not like we have access to them, you know, as students. So we're really trying to rebuild healthy partnerships and looking at gaining access again to youth that are interested in service and community building and engagement. So just to be honest, we're kind of struggling right now with rebuilding and setting those partnerships back up is something we're trying to do. And every county is a little different. So we have 23 counties and cities throughout Maryland, and we're all trying to be under one big umbrella, but still trying to maintain individuality with our populations are very different in different parts of the state. So trying to figure out how to work all that into one.
Thank you for sharing. And I see Shannon's put something in the chat. And is it Iona? I'm not sure.
Yes,
if I'm
it's
pronouncing-
Iona. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to touch on your question. I'm a part of a international school, so we don't actually meet in person. So I feel like the healthier relationships that we make within it's called Laurel Springs School, and the environment that we set virtually is much different than that. Outside of school for many students. We have student athletes, we have actors, kid actors, we have people like myself. I travel a lot, so it is challenging to create those relationships, but having clubs and having teachers there for you, and stuff like this, myself and 2 other students just received a grant recently to create a education and action cohort. And so that will be a great way to make relationships, not only with the school and creating that type of connectivity internationally, but also we have a team of NHS members who also want to be a part of that. And so for me, that's kind of the community and maintaining healthy relationships is through projects and is through club meetings, specifically, with engaging students in school.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. That sounds like an amazing school. One that I would have loved to have gone to. Rebecca, I see your hand's also up.
Yes, thank you. So going based off what Gretchen said as well is the whole rebuild, right? So I just started in my position about 2 months ago. So I'm fairly new as the director of community engagement. But one of the main things my CEO, he's new as well, is he really wanted us to get back into service learning post-COVID. So I kind of started hitting the ground running. One of the things that I'm really trying to plug in people's ear as I'm talking to them and getting to know them is, what was service learning like before COVID? How was your engagement? What was that like? Because we really have to get their buy-in in order to get the students buy-in as well. As for community partnerships go, we're part of, so I'm based in Philadelphia. We're part of the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, where I've been actively attending their networking events, different things like that, to get our school's name out there, to try and build those those connections, letting them know who we are, see who they are, where those connections make sense. I was on a call a few weeks ago where it was a bunch of the Philadelphia museums heads. So then it's like, okay, where can we have these class trips? Where can they go out into the community and do these different things? So I'm really trying to rebuild those communities so that when we're really, really ready, I have them kind of in my back pocket and they already know who we are.
Oh, that sounds excellent. I feel like I am on a similar journey with a lot of our partnerships post-COVID, and I think we're probably not alone in that. Shannon, I wanted to point out, I love your comments about family circle practices, empathy interviews, distributive leadership, and affinity groups. We've been doing some of that as well, and I think those are a great way to continue and to have these conversations around service and also community partnerships, and what does it mean to have reciprocal partnerships. So thank you all for sharing. Now we're going to get to a little bit of the meaty part of this, or the work that I am particularly passionate about, which is moving towards critical community engagement and what that means. And some of you might already be aware of some of these things, but I have these images here of, one is of a service partner who lives in one of our local, we call them townships here. It's one of our low socioeconomic areas that really struggle with all sorts of things like electricity and having running water and having access to decent healthcare and things of that nature. And this group of young people decided during COVID, because they weren't getting access to food, that they were going to start their own soup kitchen, which is a multi-pronged project to give resources to beneficiaries in the community, and they have about, I think, about 400 people that they serve every day, a lot of them being children, the elderly, people who are substance abusers, and then just your average person who doesn't have much in the way of food and other resources. And the other picture there is of one of our students who is now going to college in Chicago. And I just loved her quote about service is not something you do for the sake of doing. Service is a conversation. And I think several of you have kind of alluded to that. And going back to Ikemeling, one of the founders of that, it was a past student of ours as well. Her name is Zama. And she said to me when I went out to meet with them, we need to think about whether or not we want to partner with the school. The power was all in her hands. Having been a member of our school community as a student, she'd seen firsthand how harm can be perpetuated in her home community. And she wanted to make sure that it wasn't just this feel-good opportunity for our school and saving and doing, when really we were possibly causing more harm than doing good. One of the one of playing with kids in the community, you know, solving, I don't want to say they're not deep issues, but doing very little to solve these deeper issues and the real issues that are in the community, because they simply maybe had not gone through the process. Our young people, they want to jump right into, let's do a fundraiser to, you know, do a can drive for this community without necessarily tapping into the community and understanding what are the deeper needs. And while the canned good might be great, they're not going to go towards supporting these communities with things that they might need in the longer term, like pots and pans would have been great for Ikemeling to use to support their soup kitchen rather than that one can of soup, for example. So not looking at not that the community is looking for this in students, but students need to use the community as a means of education for their students and families, while, you know, sometimes there's no benefit for the community or support to that community. So having that that lens and really understanding the community is important. And I think in the past we haven't always done that, particularly as international schools. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the next slide. I don't know, you're welcome to pop comments in the chat if you have any comments about that, or if that is a familiar story in your setting as well. I have a little video here. I think it's a couple minutes long. I just wanted for you all to meet Tanya Mitchell. If you haven't met her before, she is one of the scholars that does a lot of work around critical service learning. So I wanted to share her with you all.
Better steward of the practices I promote. We mark liberatory or critical community engagement as different from the normative, or what I've called the traditional practice of community engagement, because it needs to be. It needs to be. We need a label, a term, to share and show the ways that we intentionally move our practice in a different direction. Kind of the tenets of what I've called critical service learning have been really centered around three key ideas, and those are attention to social change, real attention to and work to redistribute power, and developing authentic relationships, often forged through solidarity. And those three pieces in and of themselves are not necessarily transformative work. And it's not to say that there isn't a community engagement practice that attempts to do each of these things that we might label as normative or traditional. But, you know, Nadine Cruz defined service learning very early in the field as the aligning of our intention and actions in work towards more just relationships. And for me, the very focused attention to those three ideals, to really honing in on systemic injustice and the structures and systems that create inequality, that need to change, that attention again to social change, the recognition of the power formations that define and drive our society and therefore our higher education community engaged practice, that we need to disrupt those, that we need to name that they exist and really think about the places and opportunities that we can shift that practice, that we can upend those hierarchies and distribute power to where it is most impactful in shaping the work, right? You know, the centering of power in higher education institutions is a fact of our society structure, not a fact of where and how change will actually happen in communities. And so in as much as possible as we have the opportunity to center power in the space of community and to listen and respond and react in those spaces where the community's power, the community's voice, the community's understanding of how change happens, can happen, should happen, as with that as our guide, I believe that we move towards a more critical or liberatory practice. And the last piece of authenticity in relationships is driven so much by the need or the desire to see ourselves, higher education institutions, see ourselves as part of communities, and particularly the actors in those institutions, right? Me as a faculty member, my students, the administrators who guide and structure our institutional community engagement work, for all of us to see ourselves as community members first. You know, I think our university relationships have been prioritized over our very community-centered, very you know, this is the place where I vote, this is the place where I grocery shop, this is the place where my kids go to school, right? My community, my membership in this community matters, and I should be able to build my relationships from that place too. I can't dismiss my affiliation and connection to the university where I work, but I can honor, I can put forward my relationship to this community, to this place that I have chosen to live, that I desperately want to be a part of, that I want to protect, that I want to see thrive, that I can center that space too as part of my identity that brings me to this work. And so that space of building authentic relationships, of being seen and known and heard in those spaces, and seeing and knowing my neighbors, is probably some of the most important work that we need to do in community engagement in order to truly make it a critical or liberatory practice.
Okay, I don't know if any of you all have ever come across Mitchell's work, but she has several papers that her and other scholars of critical service learning have written. So if you don't know her, I would say definitely check her out. A lot of what she says really resonates with me in my practice, and that's why I wanted to share her with you all. And I'm wondering, I'm happy to take a moment to pause. Was there anything in there that really resonated with you and what she was saying? You're welcome to write that in the chat, or you are welcome to also unmute, as I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So many thoughts. That was especially what comes to mind is how we can assess our power literacy within an organization and really decide and start from where we are. Do we have a need for redistributing power? Do we have a need for aligning, our actions with our values, and how well do we listen and respond and act? So those are the things that came to my mind.
Thanks for sharing, Cheyenne.
I had similar, one of the things she said I tried to jot down, so I think it's a quote, but it may not be exact. Aligning of intention and action to make more just relationships. So you're not going in to be a savior and feel good for yourself. Kind of like you said, do you need that can of soup? That sounds great, but when you don't have the pot to heat the can of soup. So really being that intentional listener to see what's needed and not just the savior feel good moment, but just that authenticity in the relationships that she keeps talking about.
Yeah, for sure. This is just a visual of the critical service learning graphic, if that's something that you haven't seen, and just looking at the two-way arrows and the arrows that are kind of circular and not just these one-way things, and having that social justice. And she stated a couple times, as you just shared, Gretchen, the redistribution of power and the need to develop those authentic relationships, and how well are we doing those things. I know it was a lot to digest, and she said a lot of interesting and amazing things. So yeah, I'm asking you to be quick in your thinking, but I hope this is something that you can marinate on. And like I said, go search her up and find her work in some of her articles. Actually, they're really interesting to read. And for me, a lot of this links directly to what my school calls Jedi and service learning. So I think those two are not set apart, which comes with the criticality of service. And I think there has been a major shift, particularly in higher ed, with the lens on social justice and different types of justice, and this idea of inclusion and belonging and equity and the redistribution of power, which goes along with equity. And so it's been a great learning process for me, and sharing this type of work with my community, and also being on my own personal journey. Like I said to you about being here in South Africa, it's really taught me a lot and opened up my eyes to a lot of different things in regards to these reciprocal partnerships and how we as a school are engaging, and for what purpose. Is it to serve ourselves and our students and, tick the boxes, or is it for something deeper and more meaningful? So critical service learning asks students to go beyond direct service to examine the underlying social systems that perpetuate inequities in order to explore ways to counter or dismantle these systems. So I've got this image here from a group that we call Soji at our school. Well, it was actually a collaborative project between a photography group and this group called Soji, which stands for Sexual Orientation, Gender, Identity, and Expression. They partnered up with our after-school activities program to hold an exhibition in our community cafeteria area to highlight and showcase the work that they've been doing. And this moving stories of AISJ captures one's imagination in many ways on how we define, understand, and apply ourselves in an inclusive community. The stories are about recognizing the visible and invisible discrimination that we encounter at all times. But the choice that we all have is about how we respond as allies, advocates, and activists, which opens up a broader conversation for our expression. Here are the ways and means that we express. So that was from the adult leader of that group, who is also a part of the LGBTQ+I community. And he had that little quote to share with me. So I just wanted to share some of these images as a part of, like, these are some projects that our young people and our adults in our community are engaging in. This is Shanze. So when I'm thinking about critical community and great engagement, it involves developing authentic relationships, advocating for social change, and again, that working to redistribute power. Shanze was a student who started her journey with this project of hers around gender-based violence, which is a big deal here in South Africa. And Shanze started this project as an 8th grader. She is currently in the 11th grade, and you can see her little bio there that I got from her. She was a participant in the MYLC conference showcase for the last couple of years, actually. And she got passionate and interested in this through her engagement as an athlete in soccer, which is generally a male-dominated sport. And coming to South Africa, she started to learn about, through her human rights unit, gender-based violence. And at the beginning of her journey with this, she thought, oh, well, I'm going to go to this community and I'm going to talk to the young people there about gender-based violence. And it was a little bit cringy because the community was thinking, or the liaison that I had was, what is this American girl know about gender-based violence, and how is she going to come and talk to our young people when our young people are actually facing gender-based violence on a daily basis? What does she know about this that she can teach us? So I had to have a conversation with Shanze about her approach and her understanding of connecting with the community and workshopping with them, not running a workshop for them, but working with them and finding out what do they know and what can she learn from them. So it was really interesting to see her shift in her understanding of that and how she goes about engaging currently, now that she is a little bit older and a little bit wiser and has more understanding of building these authentic relationships. And we are looking at examining intent versus impact. So I love this quote from an Aboriginal elder in Australia. If you've come to help me, you are wasting your time. If you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let's work together. So I'm going to give you this opportunity for me to pause and for you to unmute if you like, or if you want to share in the chat some of your experiences based on what I've said, or some things that you can think back on. Wow, the intent and the impact were very, very different to how I imagined them. I do have a little quiz that I'm going to get you all to reflect on and look at. So this is an invitation for you, and it's called Check Yourself. You don't have to go through the whole thing. You can just skim it, because I'm very aware of our time and we've only got about 15 minutes left. And I want to be able to, get through the rest of the presentation. But I would also like to invite you to have a look at this. This is a quiz that I created based off of some bias tests that I'd done as an adult, and some of you might have done these before as well. And I use this as a part of my service learning curriculum that I created for, and I made it more student oriented and made it more suited to our international school students. So I'm going to invite you to click in there. You should be able to get into it. And I've got a set of prompts here for you that I'll let you look through, and I'll give you, let's say, I'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes to have a look through. I'm sorry, I'm going to rush you. So this is an invitation for you all to reflect on which questions interested you the most, which questions challenged you the most, what questions did you relate to the most? Were there some sticking points or questions that you didn't understand? What do you think your score would have been if it was a rated quiz, and why? How do you think students in your class or school would reflect or would react, to this quiz? Would they have similar responses or feelings to the questions? So I invite you to have a think about those. You can answer any of them you'd like. You can put it in the chat. You can verbally speak out. Either one is great. I would love to hear your thoughts about this.
The one that kind of stuck out for me, I have an idea as to why I think it was in there, but I don't know. Was something in regard to, I would not be the one that was asked to be the speaker for most of my ethnicity or race, or it was something along those lines, that they wouldn't ask me to be the speaker of a group of people like me, something along those lines.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
Sure, can
As
I
I
share?
said, yeah, please do.
Thank you. I love the question about, I think I was skimming through it. I like the question about hair color and type. I thought that was a great way to go off of appearances and how you feel comfortably about your own hair, but also your comfortability of what you think. It was like I think it was based on like do you feel comfortable that you won't get comments about your hair or something in that sense, that was different than just saying do you like your hair. It was more on like, do you feel comfortable about the comments, like if you were to get comments about your hair. So I thought that was interesting. And I like the question about do you feel represented, or does your ethnicity or race feel represented through social media. I thought that was also I found that question interesting. So those are two that I remembered the most.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. These questions, again, were formulated by my engagement and observations of my students, but also from my own personal life as well. And I created it just to generate conversations with students. There's no outcome, there's no right or wrong or anything. And yeah, it was interesting to see how I used it with 9th grade, and how one class that I was with, how they reflected on it and understood it. And it'd be interesting to do it with different grade levels to see how they engage with it, or if they're able to fully articulate and understand some of the bigger messages there. So I appreciate your comments and your feedback on that.
And I just adding on to that, like in this safe space, it's one of those things they say, like, children aren't born with prejudice, children aren't born with certain things. It's how you're brought up or environment. But when you're thinking that, I was almost thinking, like, if you ask this to a bunch of first graders, then you ask it again in 5th grade, and then you ask it again in 8th grade. Even if you use the same kids, like, to be able to see how things change, or if they change, you know, obviously some of the questions are higher level, so you'd have to change them, but just the differences in what appearance and how you share things at different ages comes across. I think that would be rather interesting.
That would be interesting, a great little social experiment. Captures some really interesting data. I mean, I know there's other similar experiments that go on, and how kids are able to articulate themselves over time with some of these really, I would call them juicy, juicy, yeah, I can't even think of the right word, but yeah, I think that would be quite interesting to find out. And because I work across my entire school, I have engaged with work with younger students around DEIJ work, and yeah, how they see themselves and how they see even me coming into their classroom, or how they see their peers. It is quite interesting. So I'm going to invite you to another reflective practice while we only have a few more minutes left. I'm wondering these things from you. And again, you're welcome to write them in the chat, or you can verbalize, or you can just simply think about them. How can we best work towards supporting our students, or even ourselves, to create more genuine service projects that model safe, inclusive, equitable, and just models of community engagement at all levels? And how do we recognize our own limitations and develop appropriate networks for this? Which is something I haven't spoke much about in this, but it is another interesting element, I think, of building reciprocal partnerships, is understanding our own limitations. when we are engaging, and what things are appropriate for us to do and what things are within our ability and scope to do and what things aren't. So I'll just give you a moment to think about that. And if you'd like to write something in the chat or unmute, you're welcome.
So I really like the second question, actually. And the first thing I thought about is collaboration. I think that's where this might come really, is like really important, so that when you know your weaknesses or your strengths, and then you have other people around you to kind of bring that, or you have a diverse group of people who are able to bring their experiences in and things, because everybody goes through something different. So you really want to learn from those experiences and bring those into the different projects that we do. So we kind of have a well-rounded kind of idea of our students, of what we're doing, and different things like that. So I think collaboration and working with different people is really important there.
Great. I think you're so right. And that speaks to a lot of areas of our engagement and work, not just in service projects, but across the board. Like that, what you just said makes me even think about the recruiting process of companies, and in international schools right now, it's been a big thing thinking about that. If you have all people of one background or nationality and they're trying to hire, generally speaking, research has shown people hire people who look like themselves. And recently, our school has been really focused on diversifying and bringing in different voices for their recruitment. And I've had some feedback on how that's felt to people. So no, that's a very good point. I'll move on to the next slide if no one else is going to share. We're running out of time. So I just wanted to share a couple of self-assessment tools with you for community engagement. The NYLC has a tool that's recently been edited. I was a part of the editing team, and I was really proud of the work that we achieved in that, and making it more relatable, I think, to current times, and just updating it to think about equity and to think about grounding ourselves in the historical work of, I guess, us as being communities, and what types of communities, and looking at the root of service learning, such as our Indigenous communities, and how we currently engaging and working with communities, and what is our current understanding. So that is a great tool. If you haven't checked it out, you can go to their website and find it. And then the other tool is a framework for harm reduction in international schools for service learning, which I'm also currently working with another group of educators who work in international schools. We're collaborating on thinking about how can we reduce harm in international schools, because we found that international schools are really good at creating these wonderful experiences, but oftentimes they do a lot more harm than good. So these are just some tools that are out there that help support equity and service and community engagement. And I know there's a number of other organizations that are also focusing on this to some extent. But hopefully, I'm going to share out a resource page here in a moment, and you all can pick up some of those things from this resource page that I'm going to share out, that I'm hoping the link to will work, because it should be open for everybody. So I'm going to pop in the chat the resources page that I was just talking about. And you're more than welcome to, I think you should have the ability to add to it as well. And if not, you can write me. You'll get my email address here in a moment, and you'll be able to write me if you have some other things. I by no means have all of the resources in the world that are related to community engagement and service learning. So I'm always looking for more, and I'm always looking to add to this list. I use it a lot in my presentations with the hope that other folks out there working in this area will be able to share more resources, so that we're all kind of supporting each other and working collaboratively, even if we are geographically and physically in far-flung places like South Africa. And here are my details of where you can find me. I'm on Twitter, which I try to be pretty good about posting, but I'm not always great. And then this is my email address. I would love to connect further with any of you who are interested. These are just another few groups and tidbits that I'm a part of, a self-care group with another group of international educators. I help support and collaborate on an affinity space for BIPOC educators about once a month. There's the Quantum 10 conference that's coming up, and I wish I had put the link into the chat, but I actually don't have it on me at the moment. But yeah, I just wanted to thank you all so much for your time and joining me and being here, and yeah, just really engaging. I've really enjoyed connecting with all of you.